What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's the Game Week 32 preview, and I'm going to start off by talking about Wildcard 32 versus Wildcard 35, because I know a lot of people have got that dilemma, and then I'm going to answer a bunch of your questions, so let's get into it. So let's start off with some thoughts about Wildcard 32 versus Wildcard 35. This is the draft that I put up the other day for Game Week 32 Wildcard. Just a couple of notes. I know that Goodmanson is currently yellow flag, but I think he'll probably be back this weekend. If not, you can just switch him to a different Leeds defender like Strout, for example. Is not that much more expensive. And if there's specific players on this you don't like, that's fine. You can switch them to whoever you want. I've not seen many drafts with Cunha, for example. You could go for another Bournemouth defender. They've got good fixtures in Game Week 33, although they do play Arsenal away in Game Week 32. So that's the kind of draft you're looking at. So Verbruggen, Van Heck, Cunha, O'Reilly, Fernandes, Palmer, Semenyo, Gross, Haaland, João Pedro, Calvert-Lewin. On the bench, Darlow, Tavernier, Senesi, Goodmanson. And the big reason to wildcard in 32 is, one, if your team is absolutely terrible this week, but the bigger reason for most people is to bench boost in Game Week 33. And that looks quite good. So Darlow against Wolves at home, Bournemouth away, although you could argue Verbruggen should be on your bench instead. Fernandes against Chelsea away, Cunha and Man United at home, Brighton away, and then Van Heck's got Spurs away, Chelsea at home. So you've got 3 double game week players, and if you're really flush with free transfers, you could absolutely sell Fernandes to someone else, then bring him back later. Obviously, there'll be a team value hit on that, so keep that in mind. But that is something you could do if you really wanted to. But in this case, you'd have to go for like a Bournemouth midfielder alongside Tavernier, which is probably not a great play. So maybe you change Cunha to someone else and bring in Neto or Enzo or someone like that. Either way, most people are just going to keep Bruno. That's probably what I would do as well. So the big reason to play this wild card is to bench boost. The question is, if you've got your bench boost, is it worth playing a weaker bench to get a better wild card later on and play your free hit in Game Week 33 instead? The answer is maybe. The free hit team in Game Week 33 is going to be very similar to what your wildcard team looks like in Game Week 33. So you're not losing much apart from the bench, basically. Now, part of that is Bruno Fernandes. I know it's Chelsea away, but he has done extremely well this season. You're unlikely to put him on a free hit team, I think. I think you would go for 11 double game weekers. So what I've done is come up with a potential wildcard for Game Week 35. Now, again, Game Week 35 is a few weeks away. Things might change, but it could look something like this. So you've got Raya and Gabriel, Fulham at home. Goodmanson's still in there. Same caveats apply. You could switch into a different Leeds defender if you wanted to. Lewis Hall, Brighton at home. Fernandes is in there. Ismail Assar, Munoz, and Henderson are all in the squad ready for their double, probably in Game Week 36. So Sarr's in the 11, Munoz on the bench, and Dean Henderson on the bench as well. Tavernier is still there. Anthony Gordon comes back in. I really like Newcastle's fixtures for the remaining 4 game weeks. Haaland, Thiaw, Calvert-Lewin, and then the other 2 players on the bench are Semenyo and O'Reilly. So you've got triple Man City, triple Palace for the double, again, probably in Game Week 36. And then if you look at the rest of the players, basically, the key thing for Wildcard 35, in my opinion, is getting Arsenal players back, and then players like Anthony Gordon as well. Like, that's the key. And obviously, getting triple up for Crystal Palace for their double. That includes, obviously, Man City as one of the games, but that's just an extra bonus. And they've got Bournemouth away in 35. So that's the key things. Arsenal players, Palace players, and I think Anthony Gordon. Is that enough reason to not wildcard into a really good bench boost? Maybe. This is what the bench would look like in Game Week 36. The other thing to mention here is everyone's got a different number of transfers available. The more you've got, the more changes you can make. So, for example, if you're sat there right now with 4 or 5 transfers, you can make your Game Week 32 team look better and then transfer in double game week players in 33 for that great bench boost. If you've only got like 1 or 2 transfers like me, it's a little bit different because you want to conserve some of them for later on to get your Palace players in. So in theory, if City and Palace double in 36, this is what the team would look like. So Henderson and Munoz would obviously be in with Sarr in the 11. So would O'Reilly, Semenyo, Haaland. Then the rest of the actual 11 is Gabriel West Ham away, Fernandes Sunderland away, Gordon Forest away, Tavernier Fulham away, and then Calvert-Lewin Spurs away. The bench is Raya West Ham away, Thiago City away, Lewis Hall Forest away, and Goodmanson Spurs away. Now you could go for Brighton players instead, because they've got Wolves at home in game week 36. So you could go for Van Heck instead of Lewis Hall. But I think for the final 4 game weeks, I'd rather have Lewis Hall overall. So again, transfer count comes into it. So the bench for 36 is 4 single game week players against West Ham away, City away, Forest away, Spurs away. The bench in game week 33 is a double game week. Let's just say Verbruggen's on the bench, right? So 2 defenders from Brighton against Spurs away, Chelsea at home. Cucurella and Man United at home, Brighton away. And then Bruno Fernandes. Despite some of the difficult fixtures those defenders have, I mean, I definitely prefer the bench in 33. There's like no question about it. So that's the trade-off. Do you want the better bench, or do you prefer to have, I guess, the better team for the final 4 game weeks? Like, how willing are you to go without Arsenal players? Well, I've only got 2 in this draft for game week 35 wildcard. You could even have 3. You could triple up on their defence. You could bring Declan Rice back. Maybe you go for a punt on Saka if he's back fit towards the end of the season. Honestly, I wish I could sit here and tell you what the answer is. I'm not quite sure. Part of me thinks you should wildcard now because you've got the quote-unquote guarantee of a return for double game week 33. The problem with the later wildcard is the sooner that Arsenal start rotating because of the league being over, the worse the later wildcard is. Because if you wildcard in 32, you're probably, unless you get really unlucky with injuries, going to get to game weeks 35, 36 with kind of 2 to 3 transfers maybe. So that lets you bring in some of your Palace players, and you don't necessarily need 3 for the double, and then maybe lets you bring in like a Gordon or a Gabriel as well. So it's not like you're going to have nowhere near this team. But I will say, if you look at this team compared to the game week 32 wildcard, it's only about half the players that remain. So you've got a Leeds defender, let's just say Goodmanson, Haaland, Semenyo O'Reilly, Fernandes, Tavernier. I think that's it. Oh, Calvert-Lewin as well. So 7 players. The rest are not on wildcard 32, so it is quite different. So I don't know. I'm really not sure which way to go. I think the other day I said I was probably leaning towards free hit 33. Every time I look at this bench boost in game week 33, though, I think I should just wildcard now and just get it done, get the bench done, and then just manage it for the rest of the season. Because although there's only 7 players on the game week 35 wildcard, same as game week 32, at least the way that I've set it up, it's not like all the other players I own on 32 but not 35 are bad. Like Cole Palmer, for example, he would have game weeks 35 to 36, Forest at home, Liverpool away, Spurs at home, Sunderland away. Like, that's not a problem. So it's not like all these players are bad. If you think about the Brighton players I've got, so Gross, Verbruggen, and Van Heck, they've got Newcastle away 35. Okay, that's not great for the defensive players, but you could play Leeds ones against Burnley at home instead. So you play Darlow over Verbruggen, hope Darlow keeps his place. Then it's Wolves at home in 36, which is fine. Leeds away 37. Like, you don't mind playing Gross. And you've got transfers. Maybe Gross to Sarr is your move for the double in 36. It's so close. I think the last thing I'll say on 35, you can frame it either way. In some ways, there's lots of unknowns for what's going to happen post the blank in 34 in terms of what the league position will be. Will Arsenal still be fighting for that title? They probably will. I don't think the title is going to be over by game week 35. It's how many weeks after that will it be done? Will they still be in Europe? They've got a 1-0 lead in the quarterfinal against Sporting. Will they rotate because of that? Right? There's lots of questions. So there's lots more unknowns. So in some ways, you're better off just getting the points now on the bench boost in 33. But unknowns can be handy to have a wild card for. Maybe you want a different 3 City players for the double in 36. Again, what if the league is almost over? Maybe Man City start rotating. It's hard to know. I would say if your team looks great in 32 and you're having a hard time convincing yourself to wildcard, just free hit 33. I think that's the key thing for most people is their team in 32 looks good. They don't want a wildcard into a worse team. And I get that. And unless you've got lots of transfers, it's hard to avoid having a poor team on paper for game week 32. So you have to weigh it up for your own team. Yeah. I don't know if I can say much more than that. I don't even know if that's helped. Like, I don't know if it's helped me, to be honest. The more I think about it, the more I think I should wildcard in 32 and get that bench boost. But if in game week, like, if I get to game week 35 and I've got no Arsenal and I don't have the transfers to get them in, that will feel bad. Like, their fixtures are so good to end the season. Like, imagine if you don't have Gabriel and he starts every game 35 to 38. Fulham at home, West Ham away, Burnley at home, Palace away. Maybe he's then just one of your transfers in. And you forget about having 2 to 3 Palace players for the double. It's a tricky one. I think the more transfers I've got right now, the more I would lean towards 32 wildcard. Because you can put players like Bowen and Thiaw in, then switch them to Calvert-Lewin or João Pedro or whoever you want in 33. I've seen some people start to think about putting more single game weekers on wildcard 32. Which I sort of get. Like, you could have, instead of Cucurella, right, you could have Munoz or Gabriel. But the more single game weekers you're putting on that wildcard, the less I think it's worth wildcarding, right? You might as well just free hit. So, I don't know. But then Bruno is on your bench in 33. That's quite good. I don't know. I think you get again, guaranteed return if you wildcard now, but you could get massively screwed over in 32. So let's get into some of your questions. Is it best to keep Gabriel and or Bruno for value reasons on wildcard 32 when bench boosting in 33, or should we go for extra Chelsea or Leeds players instead? Now, I'll try and keep this brief because I basically just touched on this at the end of the last section. Bruno Fernandes is a no-brainer because he's the best captain in game week 32, so you've got to have him on wildcard, in my opinion. I think if Arsenal had beaten Southampton in the FA Cup and you had more players to choose from because of Arsenal and Newcastle doubling, maybe there was a case to sell Bruno in 33, then buy him back later on. I think that case has gone now. So I think you just bench boost with Bruno for game week 33, and then you have him back for 35 to 38, where Man United have got Liverpool at home, Sunderland away, Forest at home, Brighton away, and no real reason to rotate. He's been so consistent, he should be on. Gabriel is trickier because he's great for 32 against Bournemouth at home, but not so good against City away in game week 33. That doesn't feel great to bench boost him. So again, if you've got lots of transfers, you could go for him and then sell him in 33, then buy him back. On the value question, you have to look at your own team and see if you're going to be able to afford to buy him back. And when you're making that calculation, I would definitely factor in another 0.1, 0.2 million on top because prices could change again. So for example, for my team, if I go to the transfer page and list view, Gabriel I paid 6.2 million for. He's now 7.2. So he's gone up a full million. If I sell him, it's going to cost me 0.5 to buy him back. And obviously, I want to factor in another 0.1, 0.2 just in case of price changes either way. So with Cucurella, who's in my wildcard team, who I got to be honest, I'm not sure would make the final cut, but he's 6 million. So I need to have 1.2 million on top of that once I build my team to be able to get Gabriel back at current price. So you just need to factor that in. I don't think it would be a huge problem, but I definitely wouldn't sell both of them. But again, it goes back to what I was saying just a minute ago. The more single game weekers you go for, why are you bothering going for the wild card in the first place if your team looks good this week? If it doesn't, that's a different story. Obviously, it saves transfers later on, but then your bench boost is worse, in which case you could just bench boost later on for single game week players as well. I mean, part of me keeps thinking now, but you do have Bruno on that bench boost. Like, that is pretty good, right? No one really wants to go without Bruno, even though it's Chelsea away. So Bruno, I think, yes, you have. Gabriel's a little bit different because, I mean, could he go and score and keep a clean sheet against City away? Of course, but it's not great on paper. And obviously, you don't need to worry about game week 34 because if you're wildcarding into a full set of bench boost players, presumably you're free hitting that week anyway. So what are the best punts on wildcard 32 that can then be moved to a double game week player? So I'm not going to go through Gabriel again in great detail, but he's probably the best defender in game week 32. So if you wanted to start with him, then move him on, you absolutely could. For midfielders, I mean, Mo Salah's got Fulham at home. Presumably he'll start that game. Maybe he doesn't miss a penalty this time. Maybe he takes a few more shots. So you could go for him as a short-term punt to then move in 33. The problem with that is he's 14 million. And I just think if you downgrade him to even like a Cole Palmer, for example, you then got a lot of money left over. So unless you've got the transfers to redistribute those funds, it's probably not worth it. And then for forwards, you've got Jared Bowen against Wolves at home, 7.6 million. He could easily be moved to Calvert-Lewin or João Pedro, someone like that. So Gabriel, Bowen, Salah. I think Salah is tricky in particular because of the redistribution of funds. Also for forwards, you could look at Thiaw against Everton at home. I think I'd rather play Wolves at home than Everton at home, but I'm not quite convinced that Bowen is better than Thiaw. I think Bowen's the one everyone is looking at this week, but there's something about Thiaw I just trust a little bit more. If you look at his underlying numbers, much better goal threat with no, outside of penalties. Thiago's goal threat has just been better than Bowen's this season. I mean, Bowen does have defensive contributions in his locker. I think it's close between the two. And honestly, Wolves are probably a little bit better than their league position suggests anyway. So Thiago, Bowen is quite a close call. I don't think there's too many other great punts. Like midfielder-wise, like Sarr against Newcastle at home, Szoboszlai against Fulham at home, Gibbs-White against Villa at home. They just don't scream, use a transfer. I'd rather just set up with a double game week player in the first place. Like Man United, obviously, outside of Bruno Fernandes, you could go for like a Cunha. I mean, in fact, because of the price, Cunha's probably better than Salah. I'm not saying specifically for 32, but just in the way it would work with your strategy, because Cunha's cheaper, so you've got less funds to have to redistribute. So I quite like Cunha. I don't see many people owning him this week. And obviously it's Chelsea away in 33, so there's not that big desire to have him. So if you can get Cunha on there against Leeds at home, then switch him, I think that would be quite nice. So probably Cunha, and then obviously Bowen, Thiago. And defensively, I think it's got to be Gabriel against Bournemouth. I know he's not a punt. Like, he's not a literal punt because loads of people own him. But he is the best defender for 32, I would say. Maybe Van Dijk, but that's not quite as exciting. So if we don't have our wildcard chip left, do we free hit in game weeks 33 or 34? Now, I've got to warn you, there's an FPL content creator cliche coming up right now. It depends on your team. And what I mean by that, broad answers to this question, the more players you've already got in your team with a double in 33, the more reason there is to free hit in game week 34. If you're sat there with hardly any players with a double in 33, most people should probably free hit that week instead. It's the biggest double game week we've got left of the season. Using your free hit to get 11 double game week players in does sound pretty good. The only caveat to that is Man City will double in 33, and they will also have a double later on, probably in game week 36. So if you don't have any Man City players right now, and you free hit in 33, you're still going to want to bring some in later on, and you may want Crystal Palace players as well. So that's going to eat up quite a few transfers. Now, if you don't have your wild card, then it's not going to be possible to maximise every single game week you've got left. So I wouldn't panic too much that if you get to 36, you can't have 6 double game weekers from Palace and City. You might only be able to get to 3 or 4 without hits. That's fine. But it is just something to consider. So I would say for the majority of people watching this video, it's probably better to free hit in game week 33 if your game week 32 team looks okay. And if it does, it's probably going to be pretty good for game week 34 onwards as well. That's essentially how I would view it. And I think because of the way the fixtures fell, where the double game week teams are Leeds, Bournemouth, Brighton, Chelsea, most of you are not going to be sat there with a ton of those players. As soon as Arsenal lost to Southampton, I think that changed quite a few plans. So broad answer, most people, it's probably better to free hit in 33 and then try and manage the later double as best as you can. But if you are sat there with a lot of players already that are going to double in 33, maybe you free hit 34 instead. So what are your thoughts on wildcard 32, free hit 33 with bench boost in 35 or 36? I don't really get this chip strategy, if I'm honest. A few people have asked about wildcarding this week followed by free hit. I don't get it. Now, I might be completely missing something. I'll hold my hands up. There are so many different chip permutations going around at the moment. My head is a bit fried. But this one just doesn't make all that much sense. One reason, when you bench boost, ideally you want to do it as close to your wildcard as possible so fewer things can go wrong. Now, obviously, you could wildcard 32, bench boost 33, and get a load of injuries before you even get to the 33 deadline, but it's less likely to happen because there's less time in between when you wildcard, when you bench boost. I'm sure on paper, You can build a really good Wildcard 32 team with a really good bench boost in 35 or 36, but more stuff could go wrong in that time frame. Also, you've got the double in 36 that's probably going to happen for City and Palace. So you need to start thinking about that now if you're using your wildcard. The problem is City will blank in 34 and Palace have got Liverpool away. So you almost want to minimise the amount of players you've got from them until you get closer to game week 36. But if you're wildcarding now, it's something you have to think about now because you're also going to blow your free hit in 33. The only reason, and again, I might just be missing something completely, the only reason I can see to go for this strategy is if your game week 32 team just looks terrible and you really want to wildcard it. But even in that case, surely you just build a team that's good for double game week 33 and just free hit in 34 because a lot of the players that are good in 33 have good fixtures later on as well. I guess the only reason to maybe do it this way, so wildcard 32 free hit 33 is if you really value Arsenal and probably Newcastle players because they've got pretty good fixture this week. You don't have to worry about them in 33 and then you've got them kind of 35 onwards. But even with Newcastle, right, they've got Arsenal away in 34. I just think if you can get through 32 with free transfers and you want to use the free hit in 33, do that by all means, but just wildcard afterwards, not before. So again, I might be missing something here, but I just don't think this strategy makes all that much sense, especially when you still got your bench boost to play. So who's the better pick on wildcard 32, Dominic Calvert-Lewin or Danny Welbeck? Despite Brighton having Burnley away this week, I think I prefer Calvert-Lewin. So he's slightly weaker for 32, but I think he's better for 33 and 35. So Leeds have got Man United away this week. Brighton have got Burnley away. But in the double, Leeds have Wolves at home, Bournemouth away. And Brighton have Spurs away, Chelsea at home. Now, I don't think Brighton's double is massively worse, but I'd rather have Leeds double. And then 35, Dominic Calvert-Lewin gets to play Burnley at home anyway. The same week, Brighton have Newcastle away. And also, I'm not fully convinced that Welbeck will start both games in game week 33. If you look at where the doubles have been put that week, Brighton are playing Spurs away on the Saturday, and then they play again on Tuesday against Chelsea. Whereas for Calvert-Lewin, they also play Saturday, but he doesn't play again until Wednesday. So I think Calvert-Lewin is very likely to start both games. With Welbeck, I wouldn't be so sure. I think Welbeck will start the majority of games outside of that. It's just the midweek ones where I'd be a little bit more worried. So double game week 33, not ideal. And then it's Newcastle away in 35. You could definitely argue that from 36 to 38, slightly better fixtures for Brighton. But again, I don't think there's much in it. So I would take Calvert-Lewin because I think he's more likely to start in 33. You get Burnley at home anyway in 35. And he's a little bit cheaper too. So who's the best Brighton midfielder to pick on wildcard? I think it's between Matoma, Gross and Weaver. Now I know there's some other Brighton midfielders that people will look at, one of which being Minte. I just wouldn't trust the minutes longer term. He has played 75 minutes in each of the last 2 game weeks, but before that it was very hit and miss. So he did seem really nailed at the start of the season, and then that kind of tailed off, even without injury. So I just wouldn't trust him moving forward. Gomez is quite nice at 4.9 million. The problem is he's on 9 yellow cards. Now he only has to get through game week 32 to avoid suspension. But if he does get his 10th yellow card against Burnley, he'll miss both games in game week 33. And he's not so good that he's worth taking the risk. Like even if you're sat there with 4 free transfers, there's more interesting things you can do than shift Brighton midfielders around. So if you're going to pick one, just pick someone else. I wouldn't go for Gomez. And then Hinchelwood's 5.1 has been playing number 10 recently, but I don't think there's a guarantee that continues moving forward. So again, I just probably wouldn't bother going for him. With Matoma, if he goes back to playing 90 minutes regularly, he's probably the best pick. And it does seem quite likely that his minutes will go back up. So if you look at what they were before injury, so I think it was like game week 28, let's just find game week 28. We got 90, 90, 80, 90, 90, 90, 90, 82. So the minutes were really good. The only reason they really came down recently is because he picked up an injury and then he was on the bench for the Liverpool game in game week 31. He should be back in the 11 after the international break. And I would expect him to start playing closer to 80 to 90 every game. If you're willing to take that bet, then Matoma is probably the best option from the Brighton midfielders. If you want more of a defensive contribution guy, you're looking at Weaver instead at 4.9. He's averaging 12.61 defensive contributions per start, and his attacking numbers aren't terrible either. Again, are the minutes guaranteed? I think mostly. So he did play 76 against Arsenal in 29, 70 minutes against Forest in game week 28, and 64 against Brentford in 27. Not great, but it's back-to-back 90s in 31 and 30. And then before that, if you go back way earlier in the season, most of the time he's playing 90 minutes. So as long as that continues, he will tick over with like your 3, 4, 5 points, a bit like Elliot Anderson. It just depends whether you want that kind of player at this stage of the season. I think it's fine, but I think with you wildcarding into a double game week, there's going to be that temptation to go for a more attacking player. So if you want the DEFCON style guy, it's probably Weaver. But if you trust the minutes, it's probably Matoma. Then you've got Gross, who's kind of in between. So he averages 8.82 defensive contributions per start. So he will pick up defensive contributions sometimes, but not very often. But his attacking numbers are better than Weaver and not that much worse than Matoma so far this season. So he's kind of the guy in the middle, and he's a 5.5 million, so he's cheaper than Matoma. And look, I don't fully trust Brighton players because of Hertzler, but since Gross has rejoined, he's basically played 90 every game. So the first match against Burnley back in game week 20, only 19. Since then, every game has been 90 minutes apart from one game, which is 87 against Fulham. So he's playing the full match. The numbers look quite good. I think he's your, dare I say, like safe pick, where he's sometimes going to get you defensive contributions, sometimes going to get you an attack and return, but he's maybe not as exciting as a Matoma. So it kind of depends what you want from this pick. I've had Gross in pretty much every draft I've done, but I could see myself going for Matoma on deadline. So is Triple Man United completely mad? I already have Bruno and Mbeumo, and I'm looking for an Enzo replacement for game week 32 and game week 34, so maybe Cunha? No, it's not completely mad, especially if it's a short-term move. It's Leeds at home this week, Brentford at home in 34. Presumably you're free hitting in game week 33 and probably wildcarding in 35. So you're literally buying Cunha for 2 home games. Neither of them are bad games either. So for me, the fact you've got Bruno and Mbeumo already shouldn't really matter in terms of which midfielder to bring in. Like if it was a question where you didn't have your wildcard coming up and you were going to have 3 attackers that needed to be sold in the same game week, that wouldn't be great. But I don't think you've got I don't think you've got that problem in this particular case. So the only question really is, for 32 and 34, is there a better midfielder than Cunha? And I would say probably not. Like, if you want to take a punt on Salah, don't mind that at all, because Liverpool have got, let me just double check here, Fulham at home this week, Crystal Palace at home in 34. But for his money, he's not even a guarantee these days. And I think in terms of other midfielders, like, I don't know, West Ham, for example, people are looking at Jarrod Bowen because 32 and 34 is quite good. But the midfielders for West Ham are not great. Like maybe Somerville, if he was completely fit, you could maybe look at him. But I believe he is still yellow flagged at the time of recording. He didn't play a part in the FA Cup game against Leeds at all. So would you even trust him if Nuno said he was available again? Like, Anthony Gordon's got Palace away this week, but that's not as good as Leeds at home. Then it's Arsenal away in game week 34. So I really like Cunha. The only slight worry would be that if Dorgu's back, would that maybe impact Cunha's minutes? Probably, based on what we saw Dorgu do at first under Carrick. But Cunha's played really well the last few games, and it's working with him off the left. So I don't think Carrick will be in a rush to change that. So I think you'd be quite unlucky for Cunha not to start either of those games, but I guess it is a small possibility. But I think it's a risk worth taking given the fixtures. So does Thiaw no longer start for Newcastle, and is it worth selling him before free hit 33? Basically, no. I wouldn't sell him. I know he didn't start against Sunderland in game week 31. That might have just been a rest because of the amount of minutes he's played. It might have been because of how poor he was against Barcelona the midweek before Sunderland. Either way, it doesn't matter because as far as we're aware, Cher is still out. And Botman has also picked up an injury, and I think he's had surgery. He'll probably be back before the end of the season, but I doubt it's for game week 32. So they're missing Botman and Cher. Therefore, it's probably going to be Livramento, Thiaw, Burn, and Hall as their back four. So you should be fine with Thiaw. I would not use a transfer on him. I wouldn't necessarily buy him right now. I'd maybe go for Hall instead. But for Palace away, don't use a transfer. Free hit 33, then decide what to do with Thiaw 34 onwards. Hopefully you've enjoyed that one. If you have, make sure to give it a like and hit that subscribe button. I'll be back tomorrow with team selection, where I'm still not quite sure what I'm going to do, but hopefully I'll have figured it out by then. Friday, final thoughts. So anything I've not covered so far, hopefully I will catch in that video. Then deadline stream on Friday as well. I'll see you soon.